To have the sitting attorney general go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me.
This is domestic terrorism. And Maria, now you have this Congresswoman Crockett who is calling for attacks on Elon Musk on her birthday. Let's take him out on my birthday, she says. And yet she turns and says, oh, I'm not calling for violence. Well, she is an elected public official. And so she needs to tread very carefully because nothing will happen to Elon Musk. And we're going to fight to protect all of the Tesla owners throughout this country, and it's this basic safety. Once again, domestic terrorism is going to come to a stop in our country.
It was wrong, because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law. The reason that our party, or I won't even say our party, our country is torn apart is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. This should not be left versus right. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. If somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cyber crime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery, then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding that maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me, and that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you.
No. You asked me a question.
I did. And
you asked me a question.
And you haven't answered my question.
So they're going to be out on the streets working
You haven't
hand in hand
answered my
with
question.
DEA
You
to
haven't
violate.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like an answer to my question. And the question is not being answered. How many ATF law enforcement officers and industry operations investigators do you anticipate will be lost to attrition as a result of the funding reduction you are proposing. You are proposing a 26% cut to ATF for fiscal year 2026, as well as a 4.4% cut to DEA. So you're going to merge the two agencies together, and then you're going to shortchange their resources, so neither one of them will be able to do the job that they have been designed to do. You've got a 34% cut to the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program, no dedicated money at all for the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. So, my view, it's fair to say that the Trump administration proposal shortchanges federal efforts to stop illegal gun trafficking and federal efforts to stop the flow of dangerous illegal drugs like fentanyl.
As I was attempting to answer your question very calmly, unlike you,
Excuse me,
what I was
Madam
saying,
Attorney General. Answer yes or no. Tell me what the numbers are. I don't want to hear all of your filibuster about this. Go ahead, please. Tell us the numbers.
So we are reorganizing. ATF agents want to be out on the street.
Okay,
working
let me
with
answer the
DEA
question for you.
agents.
I'm going to answer it for you. Page, Mr. Chairman, you give me a certain amount of time, and I have a high respect for you, but I don't have to listen, nor do my colleagues have to listen to a filibuster when it's a simple question. But I have an answer to your question. It's page 146 of the department's fiscal year 2026 budget, and the performance summary explicitly says, and let me quote, ATF will eliminate 541 industry operation investigators, reducing ATF's capacity to regulate the firearms and explosive industries by approximately 40% in fiscal year 2026. ATF will perform fewer regulatory inspections. And the department summary goes on to say, and let me quote, ATF anticipates a reduction of approximately 284 support personnel and 186 agents based on historical attrition patterns, and these personnel cuts will impact ATF across various functions, unquote. If the capacity to regulate firearms industry is reduced by 40%, if you are losing 186 ATF law enforcement agents on top of that, it is clear the direction you are headed with this budget, and that's what it is, isn't it? The proposal will weaken our ability to stop gun trafficking, and it will greatly reduce ATF support for state and local law enforcement that helps them prevent and solve violent crimes. It's a bad proposal.
Do you want to hear my answer in 3 seconds? You mentioned regulatory functions. We will not be having ATF agents go to the doors of gun owners in the middle of the night asking them about their guns, period. They will be out on the streets with DEA, guns and drugs.
How many are gone?
It will be attrition. We are not firing agents. They
Who are-
will be working
how many
with
have taken
DEA.
attrition?
Can I tell you that they all want to be on the streets? They want to be doing their jobs. They want to be
But you're getting them
seizing
off the
guns.
streets.
They want
You're getting
to.
them
We're
off the
putting
streets.
them on the
And-
streets.
and-
They want to be working with
you,
DEA.
you are getting them off the
will be
streets. There is no
efficient.
clear, and Mr.
We will
Chairman,
be
I yield back my
efficient.
time. I yield back my time. Let's get some answers here.
Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place. Let me ask you another question. I want to, if you will, hold on a second. Make sure I got the right page of facts here. You testified under oath when you last before this committee that before your appointment to Attorney General, you had served as a representative of some sort for the royal family of Qatar. There was an issue that came before you in May when President Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for temporary use as Air Force One before it's permanently gifted to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The Constitution unequivocally bestows on Congress the power to control whether any officer of the United States, including the President, may accept a gift, quote, from any king, prince, or foreign state, end of quote. And this gift clearly violates the statutory regime enacted by Congress. You've refused to answer a letter I sent to you 5 months ago asking the legal rationale you relied on to advise President Trump to accept this unprecedented gift from your former legal client. Can you make a promise today that you will disclose that?
Disclose what, Ranking Member?
I assume there was a letter or some sort of statement from your office to the White House to advise them that you felt it was permissible?
First, to address my role with Qatar, as I addressed with you during my confirmation hearing, I disclosed it in my SJQ. In private practice, I worked for Qatar for anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. That was my only involvement, and I made that very clear, and I'm very proud of everything I've done with anti-human trafficking. Obviously, in preparing any advice for the President on a jet or anything else, we consult with the Office of Legal Counsel. The confidentiality applies to their input as well. And Chairman, if you would approve and vote to approve, as Chairman Grassley said, excuse me, Ranking Member, as Chairman Grassley said, my employees, we would answer your letters a lot faster, yet you're stalling them at every stop. And to go back to your previous question, your city has a murder rate 5 times higher than New York's. 571 homicides last year. If you were serious about protecting your people, you would be asking this administration for help. You're saying that we're coming into your state and your city. We're there to help make America safe and Illinois safe, whether or not you want to.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Qatar situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the President, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is not that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you take a look?
The National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. The investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
Yes.
ranking member, please?
Take a look at the president's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, there's no incriminating client list. Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations, who was a huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that. But
Well,
that's
I will
up to the
quarrel
two
with
of
you as to Reid, somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. You won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, today, for the first time since her confirmation earlier this year, Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee to answer for her tenure in the office of the Attorney General for this calendar year. From the outset, the Attorney General was not apparently happy to be there. She ducked many questions, and I think she believed we wouldn't notice. We did. In her opening statement, the Attorney General said, quote, that playing politics with law enforcement powers, as she claims previous administrations have, will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. And that, quote, this is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. That's interesting coming from an Attorney General who, over the course of 8 very long months, has presided over exactly such a betrayal of public trust. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized the Department of Justice, turning it into a shield to protect President Trump and his allies and a sword to attack his opponents. She has made clear that her loyalties lie first and foremost with the President, not with the Constitution. And in doing so, she effectively has shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the party controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives shut down the government. Last week on the Senate floor and in the wake of the federal indictment against former FBI Director James Comey that was ordered by President Trump expressly, I warned of the dangers posed by weaponizing the Justice Department in a political fashion. A president enabled by people like this Attorney General, who can warp the Department of Justice and FBI into a personal police force to target his enemies, can turn it against ordinary Americans too. And unfortunately, the city of Chicago, which I'm proud to represent, is feeling that today. In an especially egregious instance in the city's South Shore neighborhood last Tuesday night, hundreds of armed federal agents rappelled from Black Hawk helicopters and swarmed an apartment building in the South Shore area. This made-for-movies entrance was into a building which apparently the ICE agents knew little about the occupants. ICE rampaged through the building, breaking down doors, rousting people out of bed, rounding up the residents without cause, detaining many with zip ties, including women and children. When one of the ICE agents was confronted with the children, he said, "F them kids." Detaining not just immigrants, but U.S. citizens for hours on end with no justification isn't fighting crime. It's cruel and it's un-American. Attorney General Bondi's Justice Department has defended this dubious legal basis for federal deployments in Illinois and diverted Department of Justice personnel and their components to assist with these efforts. So today, many of us pushed her for answers. I asked her if anyone at the White House consulted her about the National Guard deployments to Chicago and other cities. She refused to answer that she'd even had a conversation with the White House about their justification for sending hundreds of National Guard troops into the city of Chicago. I asked what secret the Attorney General was trying to hide from the American people, who deserve to know the legitimate, legal rationale deploying American military to our cities. She responded by attempting to blame Democrats for the Republican shutdown and attacking me for not loving Chicago as much as I hate President Trump. That was a quote. I've been a member of the Judiciary Committee for 20 years plus. Never have I encountered a witness from any other administration of either political party responding to legitimate questions with personal attacks. She had a personal attack crafted for each one of the senators and thought she was getting the best of us. But that kind of unserious response is what we've come to expect from Trump administration officials, whose priority is loyalty, not the rule of law. If DOJ is serious about reducing crimes, they would work in conjunction with state and local leaders to implement evidence-based policies that do drive down violence. But the fact is that this administration actually cares more about spreading fear into the hearts of our communities and catering to the vengeful whims of President Trump and Steve Miller. It's political theater with an immense human price tag. I also asked Attorney General about the Epstein client list. She wouldn't touch it. She said in February, publicly, that the client list was, quote, sitting on her desk. Well, it's October, and the American people are still waiting for answers on this. She refused today to provide any information about this list. And we know why. A few months ago, a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were instructed to flag any mention of President Trump in the files for Mr. Epstein. If true, that's not law enforcement, that's political protection. So I pressed her again today for more information to be made public. She refused. Mr. President, what we saw in today's hearing was an Attorney General unwilling, maybe unable, to defend what has happened in her department. Whether it's the Epstein files, Chicago immigration raids, sweetheart deals for Trump allies, or the mass purging of career law enforcement, her silence tells a story. Saying, quote, "I'm not going to discuss this with you," may have worked today, but one day she'll need to answer for her conduct in this role, and she'll need to defend her record, one that saw the dismantling of the Department of Justice for political purposes on her watch. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently.
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full
A different
review
question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, excuse me, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Homan
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a
subject
straight
to full
answer from you
review
to a very simple
by
question.
the FBI agents and the DOJ.
Do
They
you
found
know-
no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and
Do
you
you
rail
know-
against
wait a
dark
second,
money.
wait a second, wait a
Yet you
second,
work with dark
wait a
money
second.
groups all the time, Senator
Wait a
Whitehouse.
second. Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR. And to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovey, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovey?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovey III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's all pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there's an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Even public ones?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice made this decision and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If, being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great
Was James
picture.
Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes. 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any
I'm going to take
conversations
that
I have
as a
had or not
yes,
have with the
because
President
the
of the
American
United
public
States.
is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General.
The entire
whether
cabinet was
you
at that dinner,
took
too,
instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Oh,
You know,
wait.
I want to agree with my colleague, Senator Hawley, that weaponization of our justice system must end. That's the reason that I propose legislation, and I challenge him and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join me in legislation that would create a statutory right of action for people who are selectively or maliciously prosecuted for political reasons. It would codify your manual, the Department of Justice manual, on political prohibitions against political considerations in charging decisions and prohibit the White House from intervening, President Trump and any other president from intervening in charging decisions. It would make reforms to the grand jury process. You've just said this grand jury was liberal. We should reform the grand jury process to ensure that the government is not abusing its power and authority, and it will require transparency and accountability reforms at DOJ so that you will and other attorneys general be held accountable for these kinds of decisions. Will you join me in supporting that kind of reform?
Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
You know, this is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish
and
answering the question, I'm not going to
Madam
yell
Attorney
over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. But information that the Biden administration told them not to investigate Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity
topic,
by
and I'm hoping
someone
that you will review
who lied about being in the military just
and
to be
support
elected
them.
a senator.
The merger between Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Network was settled. You authorized the settlement. It was the subject of a lawsuit to block it. The settlement produced virtually no concessions from Hewlett-Packard. It was a settlement that prompted criticism from the Antitrust Division. Did you authorize that settlement yourself?
As I stated earlier, Gail Slater is doing an incredible job running the antitrust unit. And as I stated earlier, that is still a pending matter. As
Well,
you
you
should know
then
with a law
fired,
degree,
did you not,
that all
two-
mergers, if I can finish answering the question.
I'm going to,
If I
with
could
apologies,
finish. No, I'm
interrupt
answering
you
the question.
because my time is
No,
limited.
well then don't ask me a question.
Let
So,
me just ask you,
as I said, you have a law degree. You know that not only are mergers agreed upon, but they have to go to a court of law to be approved. It's a multi-step process. And as I said earlier, that is still pending. And I have full faith in Gail Slater.
And Ms. Slater reportedly objected to the settlement.
Reportedly,
And moreover,
moreover.
2 of her top officials were fired, Roger Alford and Bill Sinner. Did you authorize and direct those firings after they objected to the settlement?
I am not going to discuss personnel matters or pending litigation in my office.
Let me ask you about another merger. The merger involving 2 home health care agencies on favorable terms, likely to drive up costs for millions of America. The Transportation Department's rule to provide compensation to travelers impacted by airline-caused flight delays, which was canceled. The merger of Skydance and Paramount, after Paramount's ownership took a number of steps favorable to the president. These kinds of mergers belie the claims that President Trump himself has made, that this administration will stop big corporate mergers that ultimately benefit the owners of those corporations rather than consumers or ordinary, everyday Americans.
Senator,
and let me ask you
wait,
about
you just listed, you just gave a
Well,
list
let me just finish.
of many mergers.
I have a
Can
question
you
for
talk
you.
to me about the issue with these mergers?
I do have a question. In the merger that took place,
Which
that was
merger? You've
approved
listed many.
involving American Express GBT. I understand that Brian Ballard, longtime backer and head of the law firm where you worked, was instrumental in lobbying the Justice Department to drop that lawsuit. It was dismissed, so it's not subject to a court review. What conversation did you have with Mr. Ballard?
Senator Blumenthal, I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety when you lied about your military service.
I am
you
not
lied.
asking
You
you.
admitted you
I am
lied
not
to be
accusing you
elected
of
a U.S. senator.
impropriety. I'm
You
asking
lied.
you
How
about
dare you? I'm a
conversations
career prosecutor.
with Mr.
Don't you
Ballard,
ever challenge my integrity.
had
I have
apparently-
abided by every ethics standard. Do not question my ability to be fair and impartial as Attorney General, and anything
You'll
with
answer that
my
question to
former
another of my
firm,
colleagues.
Ballard Partners.
Thank you.
We're here again today because last week, Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States.
Yesterday, I sent out 33 letters to mayors around this country. I think 3 or 4 of them were in California alone, not surprising. I sent out letters to all of these mayors and to the governors saying, you must comply. We want to know what you're doing to comply with our federal government. So we're going to see, I'll let you know how they respond. They have 5 days to respond to me.
At a time when this federal administration is already causing so much fear and harm in our communities, these threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me loud and clear that silence in the face of oppression is not an option. The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Here is our response. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. And Boston will not back down from who we are and what we stand for. We will not back away from our community that has made us the safest major city in the country and a leading example of why cities around the country make this country safer, healthier, and more prosperous for all Americans. To all the federal officials attacking communities that embody diversity, creativity, and moral clarity, we mayors said this in D.C. nearly 6 months ago, and I'll say it again today. You are wrong on the law, and you are wrong on safety. Most of all, you are wrong on cities. The cities that live in your minds are totally foreign to the residents living in our cities. And we are picking up the pieces of your failures to deliver on your promises. Under the Trump administration, groceries are less affordable, housing is harder to build, cures for cancer are farther away, and good news on our economy has been as hard to find as the Epstein list. But as always, cities are doing everything we can to protect our residents and keep moving forward. While you are cutting health care and food assistance for our families, Boston has launched new coalitions to connect residents to fresh food, stable housing, and job training to build healthy, long lives. While you attempt to unlawfully cancel grants for our schools and roads, we funded 10,000 paid summer jobs for our young people, opened 1,000 new seats in free, high-quality early education classrooms for our littlest learners, fixed more than 27,000 potholes, and repaved more than 80 miles of city streets. While you're slashing funding for our universities, hospitals, and research institutions, Boston is building pathways to community college and UMass Boston, joining with industry to train hundreds of residents for careers in life sciences and clean energy, and partnering with our city's largest employers to double the size of our health careers high school. While you deploy military personnel to occupy American streets, we are building community safety. Our police don't have to hide their faces. Boston police do not hide their faces because they are members of our community. Our officers keep us safe by getting to know our residents, not working to remove them. Back in June, the city of Boston filed a Freedom of Information request with ICE, demanding the bare minimum of transparency from our federal government. ICE talked a big game, promised that they would get us information, and it's been 2 months without any answers. So today, we will file a formal appeal, insisting that ICE produce the public records we asked for, and we're prepared to take additional legal steps if they continue to refuse transparency. Over the last several months, we've watched Donald Trump send the National Guard into LA and DC to stoke fear and disorder. Boston stands with these cities as they sue over his abuse of power. We have reviewed those cases, and we are prepared to stand up for our city's rights if we need to. Your attacks all come back to a common aim. The Trump administration seeks to divide, isolate, and intimidate cities and make Americans fearful of one another. But Boston is proof of something far more powerful than lies and intimidation. That safety and community come from loving your neighbor as yourself. Attorney General Bondi, we are gathered here today to show you who we are in Boston. More than 100 years before your home state was founded, Bostonians were across the street in Faneuil Hall setting the foundation for our democracy and rule of law. 100 years before that, Bostonians were founding the first public school and public park in the country. This has always been a city of revolution, of innovation, of standing up for the public good, and never bowing down to tyranny. With me today, our fellow public servants and veterans, public safety and faith leaders, civil rights advocates and labor union members, teachers and business owners, entrepreneurs and artists, youth and seniors. This is our city. This is our country. And I'm so proud and grateful to show the world who our community is here in Boston and what we're made of. Cities aren't a threat to America. They fuel the American dream. They bring us together. Great cities make our country great. Boston will never back down from being a beacon of freedom and a home for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, as you know, the Supreme Court in Trump versus United States held the president has absolute immunity to commit crimes in certain core areas of the president's responsibility. One of those core areas is the Justice Department. So in a breathtakingly dangerous and irresponsible decision, Justice Roberts and the majority held the president could commit crimes using the Department of Justice and be immune from prosecution. Justice Sotomayor correctly said this new immunity lies about like a loaded weapon. So the fear and the concern we have is that the incoming president will use that loaded weapon, that immunity, to commit crimes through the Department of Justice. And for that reason, it is all the more important that we have an attorney general who has the independence, the strength, the intestinal fortitude to say no to the president when it is necessary. So my first set of questions has to do whether you have the independence to say no when you must say no. And you can say this is hypothetical, but it is not hypothetical. So let me start with one very specific non-hypothetical. The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case. You know,
and sitting here,
72%,
sitting here today,
Senator, 72% of Americans
please, I only have 7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question.
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging
I'm sitting
law
here as a
enforcement
nominee.
sensitive information. So just tell us,
I'm
are you
sitting here as
aware?
a nominee.
Just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
Are you aware of
horrible. Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not looked
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has
Based on
asked
what you
me
know.
to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a
The
hypothetical.
president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president has
We're
called-
also
the
worried about
president-
Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
You know what
called
we
for
should
this-
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
The
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are
through
aware,
the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
Your
my-
robberies
Ms.
are
Bondi,
87%
my
higher
question-
than the national
my question
average.
is this.
That's what I
My
want to
question
be
is this.
focused on, Senator.
Do you have the
if I'm
power to
confirmed
say
as
no to the
Attorney
president?
General.
And what you're suggesting today by your non-answer is you don't have the independence to say no to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It also requires you, if you're going to be a good attorney general, to be able to tell hard truths to the president. So my questions now are, can you tell hard truths to the president? So let me start with an easy truth that you could speak to the president. Can you tell us, can you tell him that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Can you say that? Do you have the independence to say that? Do you have the gravitas, the stature, the intestinal fortitude to say, Donald Trump, you lost the 2020 election? Can you tell us that here today?
Senator, what I can tell you is I will never play politics. You're trying to engage me in a gotcha. I
No,
won't
I'm just
do it.
asking you a simple
I
question.
won't play
If you can
politics
speak truth
with any
to
ongoing
power. So let me ask you
investigation,
another.
like you did
let me-
leaking your
let me ask
colleague
you-
Devin Nunes's memo.
If you can't answer the question, let me ask you a different, what should be a simple truth, not a hard one. Was there massive fraud affecting the result of the 2020 election, yes or no?
Senator, I'm glad you asked that question, if you'll let me answer what I saw in Pennsylvania.
No, I asked a simple question about massive fraud.
I can only tell you what I saw in
No, I know you want to
Pennsylvania.
answer a different question, but my question is, can you tell us whether there was massive fraud affecting the results of the 2020 election, yes or no? Was there
I
or
can
was there
tell
not?
you what I saw when I went
That's
as an
not my,
advocate
that's
to
not
the
my
campaign.
question. So you can't answer that question. You can't speak that even easy truth to us, let alone to the president. So let me ask you a different question. It will also be important that you give good advice to the president. Are you prepared to advise the president not to pardon people who beat police officers?
Senator, as I said, the pardons are at the direction of the president. We will look and we will advise. I will look at every case on a case.
so you
Let me
look at-
finish. On a case-by-case
Okay,
basis.
okay, good.
And I abhor violence to police officers.
Follow up with that. So will it be your advice to the president, Mr. President, I know you said you want to issue hundreds of pardons on day one. Will it be your advice to the president? No, Mr. President, I need to go over them on a case-by-case basis. Do not issue blanket pardons. Will that be your advice to the president?
Senator, I have not looked at any of those files. If confirmed, I will look at the files
And
for
will
the
you be able to
pardons, as well
will
as
you
the
be able to
ongoing
review
investigation.
hundreds of cases on day one?
I will look at every file I am
Of course
asked
you
to
won't.
look
So
at.
will you advise the
Hey,
president?
can I
will
answer
you-
the question?
Well, my question
I
is-
would have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want.
You'll be able to review
Listen, I'm
hundreds
not
of
going to
cases on the first day?
mislead this body nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that, let me ask
You were
another question.
censured by
It will
Congress, Senator, for
it will
comments just like this that
it
are
will
so
also- It will also be important for you to be able to preserve the records, the evidence of the department. Are you ready to commit that none of the evidence in the January 6th investigation will be destroyed under your watch?
Senator, I will follow the law. I will consult with ethical officials in the
Do you
department.
see any ethical basis to destroy evidence in the January 6th investigation? Then why can't you answer the question? Why can't you say, I commit to this committee, we will never destroy the evidence in the January 6th investigation? Why can't you give this committee and the American people that assurance?
Are you frightened because evidence was destroyed against President Trump that was false? Is that why you're frightened now? I can't believe this is even.
Why do you have difficulty answering that question?
I can't believe
Why do you
you're
have
asking such a
difficulty?
question.
Why do you have difficulty promising to preserve evidence at the Department of Justice? Why is that a difficult question?
I will follow the law.
It shouldn't be a difficult question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I know that you are pleased that we are moving to the end of round one. And we appreciate your being here. And I appreciate that you told my California colleagues you were willing to work with them, even in light of the manner in which they have approached you. Now, one thing I think we need to have everybody understand that is watching this hearing today and everyone sitting in here, what we have witnessed over the last 4 years with a weaponized DOJ. My colleagues have talked about this, and the American people know this. They know what was carried out against President Trump and his administration. And in November, they voted to see an end to 2 tiers of justice, 2 tiers of treatment, 2 tiers of access, because they have absolutely had it with the lies, with the accusations, and with the attacks that have come against so many people who were just seeking to live their lives. And then all of a sudden found the FBI or another federal agency or the DOJ knocking at their door. You know, Ms. Bondi, it would make you believe that my colleagues have learned nothing from the elections in November.
Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that? Okay. Here's what well, no, we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it. I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Serralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges.
Including
who
orchestration.
threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo, thank you.
2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean?
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether
All
he
I
took the money?
know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
And,
was she?
Senator Schiff,
was she
if
right?
you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were
Excuse me.
censured
No,
by Congress for lying with your
we can
egregious
stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
personal attacks. You've been
So-
attacking
so-
my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been
But
attacking.
we're interested in.
borders
What
are.
we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
Want your,
So
no,
you were
oversight.
asked
want
you
your
were asked
5
by my
minutes of
colleague.
fame
You were asked by my colleague.
attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you
You
support?
don't have to tell me what is my decision and
Well,
what is
then-
not my
then-
decision.
then-
I
and
said
you- and
you
you
can
don't
talk
have
to
to-
Director
you
Patel.
don't have to try to-
You think
you
you've
don't
got a
have to-
gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders are.
Excuse me. You
Who's
don't-
been out there
excuse me.
fighting for our country
Madam
since
Chair,
Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed I believe the American people, should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
So
for
I
trying
guess,
to
I guess
impeach
the answer
him
is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let me-
Biden tried
let
to
me
cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse
Ukraine?
me, let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, a law degree,
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
career. You can attack me later, and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day to day.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
what
the current
about the
president.
fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to be,
senatorship?
This is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about the
Are the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be
your entire career,
that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're
personal,
a failed lawyer
refuse
because
to accept,
you don't understand when
excuse
someone
me,
can and cannot
refuse
answer
to
a
accept
question.
personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
Will
that,
you
Madam Chair,
apologize to Donald
I yield
Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator.
May I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction to the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce with unanimous consent the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter from Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the
still
president's
arguing,
enemies
or are you admitting-
rather
Bondi,
than
Ms.
protecting the
Bondi, one
country.
moment.
May I have unanimous
Are you
consent to enter
entering
these
that
into the record?
without objection?
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Brown.
Another topic, with the respect to voting rights and the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, or in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
Right.
includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out,
That's perfectly legal.
but there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that. But I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay, let me-
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it? Who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states. And you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is, the Secretary of State is. And you can resolve that with her. But
And we have every right to have that information,
yeah, here's where
Senator.
I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it
You're
over?
a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
And I
asking-
take fair and free elections in this
No,
country
we
very
all-
seriously.
we all
And that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information.
But
And we
the
are
question
involved
here-
in litigation on that, and I
Here's the
assume we'll be
question
involved
I
in
have.
litigation with
We have-
Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had, our former Republican governor was secretary, was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to
No.
the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you
those
didn't
were-
answer
those were
any of the
things-
questions that you said were pending in litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing
I understand
with all the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification, you're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.